The trad wife is a homemaker, a caregiver. She cooks, often making meals from scratch. She's obedient to her husband, all while handling the family's child rearing. She's beauty and she's grace. She's domestic bliss wrapped up in an aesthetic package. And most importantly, she makes it all look effortless. Lovely to watch and aspirational to many. But this performance is a stark contrast from the realities of being a homemaker. In reality, motherhood is messy, unpredictable, and beyond stressful. But trad wives are selling you a curated illusion of domestic bliss. Despite this idyllic portrayal of their lives, trad wives are far from the traditional housewives that they claim to be. They're selling you a story, and the story is fiction. Trad wives are a newly emerged online trend of women who gained popularity on social media platforms like TikTok and Instagram, showcasing their lifestyles as domestic housewives and espousing so-called traditional values.
Number one rule as a trad wife: this is your duty as a wife. A man's home is his castle, so he should be treated as a king.
To purposely go in your closet and pick a pair of leggings, knowing you have other pants and other outfits, and to choose that as your whole day's attire. Ladies, let's wear clothes. Let's dress like women.
Two of the most popular trad wife influencers are Hannah Nealman of The Ballerina Farm and Nara Smith. Both Hannah and Nara epitomize the traditional housewife archetype, being thin and aligned with Eurocentric beauty standards. Hannah, who presents herself as a down-to-earth farm wife, is married to Daniel Nealman, the son of David Nealman, who founded 5 airlines including JetBlue, and her appeal lies in this romanticized version of farm life, complete with beautiful scenery and wholesome family activities. Nara Smith is married to Lucky Blue Smith, a fashion model who is signed to one of the largest modeling agencies, IMG Models, alongside Nara, who's also a model. Nara, with her soft ASMR-esque voice, comes up with these really elaborate stories that her children randomly requested that she make very specific meals from scratch.
This morning my toddlers requested some cornflakes for breakfast, but I don't usually keep those in the house, so I just decided to make them. I combined some cornmeal, corn flour, and a tablespoon of coconut sugar with some water until it was batter-like consistency. Today my toddlers wanted cereal for breakfast again, so I decided to make some Cinnamon Toast Crunch since that's my husband's favorite cereal and the kids have never had it. My husband's about to go on a 25-hour road trip, so I decided to make him some bubblegum lollipops as a little treat on his drive. Started out by making my bubblegum by spreading some powdered sugar on some wax paper, melting down my gum base, transferring that into the middle of my mounds I created. My sister's in town to visit and she's been craving bubblegum so bad, but she ran out, so I just decided to make it for her. I poured some powdered sugar on some wax paper and created a well before combining my gum base with some corn syrup and slowly melting it down.
Okay. Whatever that means.
And not only does she claim that her children are making these random requests for food, but she also just so happens to have all of the ingredients just lying around her house to make these very specific food items. Both Nara and Hannah post super aesthetic content of them performing domestic duties, namely cooking. It's important to note that they're always in the kitchen cooking. They are very specific about the domestic duties that they portray. You don't see them bending over doing the grunt work. You don't see them doing the non-aesthetic parts of being a housewife, right? You only see them doing really aesthetic chef-fluencer type content. As journalist Kat Tenbarge puts it on Twitter, one thing about the current popular trad wife housewife depiction is they aren't actually doing hard, essential domestic labor. You rarely, if ever, see them clean their own giant sparkling kitchens or bathrooms or cook substantial food beyond desserts and special treats.
Have you ever asked yourself why it is that trad wives who promote traditional gender roles have all the time in the world to make cereal from scratch, but somehow never seem to record themselves doing essential domestic labor like vacuuming, trying to get a particularly nasty stain out of a shirt, or scrubbing a toilet? When they are performing labor in these videos, it's always something that, strictly speaking, is unnecessary, and they are doing it the hardest way possible. Because the answer is that it is for show. It is all a performance. In his remarkably prescient 1899 book, The Theory of the Leisure Class, Thorsten Veblen coined the terms conspicuous consumption and conspicuous leisure, suggesting that those with wealth and power, no longer having any economic production to contribute themselves, instead contribute to the production and consumption of leisure. And those consumption practices, those leisure activities, are conspicuous precisely because that is how the leisure class signals their difference from the working class, signals their exceptionality and their superiority. They're not better than us because they can make their children cereal from scratch. They're better than us because they are so wealthy and well off that they have nothing more important to worry about. Because these videos are not instructional. They are maybe inspirational, but they are always performative. This is not real labor. This is symbolic labor. It is nothing more than social signaling that this woman and her family belong to the leisure class. And it is also how she builds and signals her value if you are the sort of person who operates within an exchange economy that assigns high and low value to human beings. Because her value to her husband is not in her ability to care for the home or care for the children, right? Anyone who is able to engage in this level of conspicuous leisure has somebody that they are paying to do all of those things. No, her value is instead in her ability to perform the role of trophy wife, and to be the ultimate realization and personification of her husband's socioeconomic prowess. Because tradwives are conspicuous consumers, yes, but it is the audience's consumption of tradwives that truly makes them valuable to their husbands.
On TikTok alone, Nara has amassed 8.1 million followers, and Hannah, aka Ballerina Farm, has amassed 7.3 million followers as of today. While they're selling us this image of organic, built from scratch perfection, behind the scenes, this is all a production. If you look at their content closely, you can tell that there's obviously a team of content creators, script writers, and editors. They get the perfect angles and the perfect shots. Much like we discussed in our self-care and overconsumption video, these women are performing. They're utilizing very sophisticated storytelling. Instead of just saying, hey, I'm gonna make a meal from scratch, they have to come up with these really elaborate stories, like my son requested at 2 o'clock in the morning that I make him some Apple Jacks from scratch, and I just so happen to have the Apple Jacks ingredients to make that from scratch just lying in my pantry. It's a calculated performance of motherhood and wifery, and it's anything but organic and authentic. The daily routines that they show us are carefully choreographed and edited to perfection, and they present this facade that masks the realities of their actual lifestyles. These women are far from being confined to a home. These women are working. Both Nara and Hannah rack up millions of views with every single post that they make, and those millions of views translates into money, and they're making a lot of money convincing you that their lives are real. These women are making thousands, if not millions of dollars on sponsorships, brand deals, TikTok revenue, all of the above, and they don't have to rely on their husbands, but they're selling you the idea that you should rely on yours. These women are 1099 contracted employees. They have to report their income to the IRS. They're earning income doing a job, therefore they are employed. They're building a brand, they're building personas, they're selling you products. As Professor Uju Anya puts it, if you can see the picture on the left is staged marketing for products and a regressive, unrealistic lifestyle, please recognize that that's also what's happening on the right. The women who are the faces of this trad wife phenomenon have amassed a large amount of wealth that make their lifestyles possible. They do not face the struggles that typical homemakers face, that typical farmers face.
Ballerina Farm can do many of the same activities of the women that she tries to emulate, but she has no stakes, whereas most farmers and most women who are homemakers have a lot at stake. Why are there no stakes to her life? Because she married into the JetBlue family. This doesn't mean that her life isn't meaningful, and it doesn't mean that her life isn't difficult. It does mean that when people run to defend her and to say she's working very hard, they're running a farm, they're missing the point. The point is that, like many tradwives, her activities are not tied to direct financial stress. And when your activities are not tied to direct financial stress, even if the activities themselves are difficult, you are able to move through your day with more patience, with more benevolence, with all of the things that can make you a better mother, a better caregiver, and a better worker. Which means that you can often depict an activity or a lifestyle inaccurately because you are depicting it without all of the stress that any other average person would get saddled with if they made the same choices as you. So for example, just off the top of my head, if I were to buy like a 400-acre piece of land in Utah and I wanted to build a big cattle farm and start selling bread and aprons and I had no experience whatsoever, I would find that to be super stressful. How much money do I have to hold my family over before I have to start making a profit? Is there a risk of bankruptcy? How am I going to learn how to do all of this stuff when there is no room for error? Or, again, just off the top of my head, if I had access to like $100 million, I feel like a lot of that stress would go away. I'd have time. I'd have time to figure it out, time to make mistakes, time to try it out. I'd have a long runway before we had to profit. It is also important context for most successful businesses. And you have not just a safety net, but the equivalent of like a Series A fundraising round in your family, you have the ability to sleep well at night. You have the ability to do things that are often considered mundane or difficult, but with a much better psychological approach. You have the knowledge that your children are never going to go unfed. That is not something that most farmers in America can say. And again, saying it louder for the people in the back, it's not Ballerina Farm's job to talk about this. Her job is to be a brand. Her job, as she has made very clear, is to profit on Instagram. But it is worthwhile food for thought for all of the women who love to stand for her. I would also add that this is why I think it's like complete bullshit when highly wealthy people and influencers try to sell self-care to us. It should be considered hugely suspect, and it comes to me from like a very inauthentic place. So much of the stress and mental health issues that we have in this country have to do with financial struggle. And so if someone is talking to you about that and not including that as a central part of this conversation, then you should be hugely suspicious of their motives.
These are incredibly wealthy women selling you a polished brand and a polished story to make money. These influencers aren't merely documenting their lives, they're selling you a curated product. Besides the obvious point of you should never rely on another person for money, that's obvious. I discussed that extensively in my stay-at-home girlfriend video from a couple of years ago. Check that out for my thoughts on that. The portrayal of this carefully curated homemaker brand and these traditional gender roles is all trying to sell you some propaganda to attract more followers, not only to their social media profiles, but also to Mormonism. Both Nara and Hannah and many of these other tradwives are in fact Mormons. The Mormon church, as we all know, has long been rife with controversy, with bad negative perceptions.
Where do they go?
Welcome to the Mormon Church, America's most respectable cult.
When you have these Mormon tradwife influencers being the face of this trend, you're sanitizing the image of Mormonism. And that's why it's widely believed that the Mormon church has been funding this tradwife trend. The reality is that these tradwives are business women first and foremost. They're utilizing their platforms to generate income and also to spread influence. It's no wonder that these women aren't everyday looking women. They all have a very specific look, and it has to be an attractive image in order for you to aspire to this lifestyle. They're marketing a fantasy that aligns with gender essentialist ideals. And the propaganda that they're selling is so convincing because in many cases it's not overt. It almost doesn't matter what is being said. It's the way that it's carefully edited and made to look super aesthetic that lures you in. Nara has recently been accused of stealing content from a smaller South African creator named Onezwa Mbola. Onezwa posts videos of her making a bevy of traditional South African meals from scratch. She lives that life. She's about that life. She lives in rural South Africa, where she's immersing herself in the elements, where she's actually getting her food from the earth. And while Nara claimed not to know who she is, Nara actually commented on one of Onezwa's posts, sharing her admiration for Onezwa in the past. And while Nara's fans were quick to attack Onezwa in Nara's defense, we have to talk about, regardless of whether you can prove that content was stolen, because the argument has been made that no recipes are original, whatever the case may be, whether Nara stole her recipes or didn't steal her recipes, we have to talk about the fact that someone that looks like Onezwa, a dark-skinned African woman who is not thin, would never be able to get the same platform as someone who looks like Nara Smith, as someone who looks like the Ballerina Farm lady, as someone who looks like all these other women who are the faces of the tradwife trend. The faces of the tradwife trend have a very particular aesthetic that's inaccessible to many, if not inaccessible to most. Tradwives are also selling this idea that women shouldn't work, and they're portraying themselves as though they're oppressed because they choose not to work.
When I tell you I love to cook and clean, I love to do it, and I love to do it for a man, just to see the look on a man's face when you cook him a meal that is so good, you could just tell he's proud. There's just something, I don't know, there's something within me as a woman, maybe it's almost turning 25, that got me thinking, like, this cooking and cleaning thing isn't bad. Like, I just don't understand why women wanted to work. What was the point? Like, there is nothing satisfying about working. A man that takes care of you, a man that provides for you, you don't have to worry about anything, no bills. I will cook and clean all day. Yes, I'm crying over some onions, but is this what we fought for as women? I don't know. I'd rather cry over some onions than cry about a job, that's for sure.
Here's the thing. I don't believe that we should spend all of our lives doing labor and working for the man, so to speak, in the capitalist hellscape that we live in, where we own no means to production and we're all being exploited, right? But this woman is working. Not only is she working as an influencer, but she's literally working for the man. She's doing domestic work, and domestic work is work. Cooking meals for your family and cleaning and taking care of a household is work. That's without any workers' comp or benefits or legal safeguards safeguards that an actual employer provides. Domestic labor in particular is also very menial work, very grueling work that isn't fulfilling or intellectually stimulating. It's labor that you can't put on a resume, can't help you buy a home, can't help you buy a car, can't help you with your credit score, can't help you to independently participate in society in a meaningful way except for asking your husband for your weekly allowance. Even though you're not punching in the clock, it's a job. We have to build a life in which we can be independent, in which we can rely on ourselves for our money, so we don't have to beg a man to fund our lifestyles.
This framing that there are women who work and there are women who don't work because men have gifted them the opportunity to stay home and cook and clean for them, you're both working. It is fine to want to stay home and do those things, but that is not a gift of no labor. You are both working, and when you're doing it exclusively in the home, you're working with no rights, no protection, no safety net. You're providing services that if you weren't around, that man would have to pay multiple professionals to get, because it's work, it's valuable work. But your job security in doing that is entirely contingent on that man deciding to keep you around. As your youth and your beauty, two things that are very protective of that job security, to a certain point, start to fade. Just because it feels fulfilling and free to not go to work every day does not mean you are free. And freedom from oppression is having choices. Without money coming in that is yours, if that relationship ends, your job ends. You'll have no money, you'll have no resume, you'll have no references, no roof over your head, no unemployment check, you will have no choices but to find another man to support you.
Tradwives also tend to engage in rage bait, where they say these really outrageous things. They know, they're fully aware of the performance, they're fully aware of the grift, right? They're saying these things that are outrageous enough that people will engage with them. They understand that what they're saying is regressive. They understand that they're not even about that life. They're not even really living that life, but they understand that outrage creates currency, that outrage is a form of capital in 2024. The more engagement they drive, the more money they can make. So they say these really regressive things because they know that the feminists are going to be in their comment section trying to light them up, and it's only making them more money. There are a lot of people who will say anything and do anything for a check. These people are being funded by some very wealthy entities who are paying them to sell a certain lifestyle to women. It's worth noting that a lot of these tradwives are very young. They're in their early to mid 20s. Some even got married as teens. Their brains aren't even fully developed. They're able to sell you this idyllic lifestyle because they have yet to have to live with the long-term consequences of it. Former tradwives who have grown up are coming forward to discuss how it ruined their lives.
If you're wondering why you don't see a lot of tradwife content from women who are sort of 35 and above, it's because they end up like me. Hi, for those of you who don't know, I was a stay-at-home housewife from when I was 17 to nearly 27. What my life looked like for that decade was, essentially, I waited for him to come home for about 10 years. By the time I was 21, I had 2 kids under 3, and so that took up an enormous amount of my time. They were only allowed to go to a Steiner Waldorf school under his rules, which basically means no tech, no screen time. They learn how to do things with like wool and clay, and it's actually really culty. And I personally wouldn't have picked that, but what he said went. I was incredibly submissive, and I loved him absolutely unconditionally, regardless of what he did to me. And yes, this was also a very abusive relationship, but I don't think that's necessarily typical to the degree that happened to me, to everyone in these kinds of relationships. I was very fortunate that I worked part-time some of that time, although it was really hard for me to hold down work because my work was never prioritized, and I'd only work like 7 hours a week anyway. So not enough to have financial independence, but enough to have a little bit of like pocket money, although he would often dip into that as well. The industry I worked in and like got any kind of education in, because I wasn't allowed to go to uni, was the beauty industry, because that was considered safe because I wouldn't have male co-workers and therefore I wouldn't have male friends, and I wasn't allowed to talk to male friends anyway. Even the ones I'd been friends with for like over a decade at that point. I wasn't allowed to get tattoos. He had absolute say over what I looked like. He would decide how I dressed, how I wore my hair, and if I changed things without like asking him first, he would put me down either very directly telling me I looked awful, or indirectly by saying, oh, I liked how I looked before, and he'd hassle me with it until I changed it to a way that he deemed acceptable. A really fun thing about that is I figured out years later that he actually just encouraged me to look like the women he was cheating on me with, so that's fun. I learned how to cook like a chef because his expectation was, from the time I was, again, 17 years old, was that I made everything from scratch with fresh ingredients, so I went to the supermarket every single day. But because I wasn't allowed to drive, I had to walk to the supermarket or take like buses and trains, and a lot of the time he wanted really niche food that meant I had to go on missions all over town, and that would take up my whole day with my toddlers, in a pram, wandering around. And so what happens is eventually these women make friends. I made friends with other mothers because my children started school, and I realized something actively bad was happening to me. I made a plan and I left. It took me 2 years. And so that brings you to why you don't see women who are older, who are mid-30s, mid-40s and up, making tradwife content. When you leave, you have no ability to make your own money. You have no financial independence. So do you know what you have to do? You have to go study. You have to get a job. You have to figure out how to untangle all of his wants over your needs, which takes forever. Case in point, I am 34 years old. I have just started an undergrad degree and I have just learnt how to drive. And those two things are absolutely incredible. The first thing I did when we broke up, when I had a bit of money to spare, I got tattooed because I was finally allowed to make decisions about my own body. My hair has been every colour and length you could possibly imagine since we broke up because I get to make decisions about how I look. I am still a good 10, 15 years behind everyone else my age in terms of setting up my finances, in terms of building a career for myself. If you've been in this relationship since you were like 18 and you are now 40, 50 or above, you have no idea how to make a career happen. And because you've got so many gaps in your resume, again, I was fortunate that I work part-time, you're not getting a job. You don't get to have any kind of life. You will be destitute forever. And I also feel like, and I can't relate to this because when we broke up, my children were still in elementary school, but I feel like if you've been in this relationship for decades, your grown-up children are probably also going to be really entitled because they've been raised on the belief that they can treat you like this because that is the norm. And so there are so many of us who have been in these kinds of relationships. I see them all over this app who are in their 30s, 40s and 50s who have left these kinds of relationships, who are like, for the love of God, don't do it. If you really want to cosplay as a 50s housewife, get an education, get your own bank account, put off getting married till you're a little bit older.
I'm here to tell you why that whole trad wife trend is absolute bullcrap. I just got off the phone with a friend of mine who has been married for about 15 years now. Before she got married, she got a master's degree in education and a law degree. She met her husband in law school. He wanted a traditional wife. She did not take the bar, and instead they got married. He took the bar, he passed the bar, he became a lawyer, and she became a full-time housewife and later a mom. Times 5. They have 5 children. Okay, fast forward 15 years, where he has been cheating on her for years. She finally caught him red-handed. She has enough confidence and determination to say, I want a divorce, I'm done. He's walking away with a $300,000+ job that he got, by the way, from one of her mom friends in a mom group. Let's just put that aside. She has nothing. She has 2 advanced degrees, 0 experience. So are they even worthwhile? Are they even worth anything? She has nothing to show for it. And in the last 15 years, what has changed in law and in education? Probably quite a bit. So she is stuck at this crossroads of feeling like she has nothing. And before you say alimony, he is trying to screw her out of everything he possibly can. She cannot keep the house, even though she has primary custody of the children. She can't afford it. She has no job. Absolutely no job right now. And even if she did, there are 5 children. So between drop-offs and pickups at 4 different schools, she has about 3 hours in the daytime when she is not tending to children. So to any woman who is considering that the trad wife lifestyle might be it for you, I encourage you to think about this story. Remember it. And just remember that you as a woman need to have something for yourself. If anything, just for yourself, because you absolutely never know what can happen in life, whether it be divorce, whether it be cheating, whether it be the passing away of your spouse. You have to take care of yourself and put yourself first. You can still love and support your husband and be an incredible wife who takes care of your man, but take care of yourself first.
Cooking and caring for your family is a wonderful thing to do. I think it's a great way to show love for your family by making them a meal. In the 1970s, the International Wages for Housework campaign argued that under capitalism, the idea of love is often used by those in power to keep wages low or avoid paying them altogether. The phrase, do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life, hides the reality that housework is tiring, repetitive, and often goes unrecognized. They pointed out that while caring for a home can be an act of love, it's also hard, draining work, and that's where the problem lies. Unless you can afford to have round-the-clock maids and au pairs to help you with your child rearing, you're not about to be living this trad wife lifestyle that these women are portraying. The values that these trad wives espouse aren't traditional at all, because at the end of the day, most people don't have access to the amount of wealth that they have. Most couples have 2 people in the household who are working. We have to look deeper beyond the surface level and understand that social media is not real life, and what these women are portraying to you is not real life. I personally believe family and friends should be the most important thing in our lives, right? Our communities should be what we're prioritizing. I believe that we shouldn't define ourselves by our ability to labor and produce. But these trad wives are still defining themselves by their ability to labor and produce, by their ability to perform womanhood by way of cooking and cleaning and having babies. But there's more to womanhood than that. As women, we are many. We're not meant to be boxed in or labeled. We can have it all. A family, if you so desire, a career, dreams, aspirations. We can be teachers, advocates, entrepreneurs, students, and everything in between. True fulfillment comes from being multifaceted and enjoying all that life has to offer, not defining yourself through the lens of regressive labels of what a woman should be. But I would love to hear from you in the comments down below. What are your thoughts on this trad wife trend? What are your thoughts on how these women like to portray themselves like they are oppressed? Not because they are being subjugated to working in the house, but because other women dare want to actually get a job and work and earn an income and earn their own way. That's why they're oppressed. I would love to hear from you all in the comments down below. And if you like this video, definitely give it a thumbs up. And if you really liked it, definitely stick around, subscribe. I have tons of more content like this. And if you want to have more intimate, candid conversations with me, then you can definitely sign up for my Patreon and pick a tier that works for you. And last but not least, find me on my social media platforms that you can find down here. And besides all that, thank you all for watching, and I'll talk to you all next time.